So I will start now. We're not supposed to be wearing sports coats, but because you paired it with tennis shoes, I think we can give her a slide, right? We're good?
It's also insanely cold. It's also insanely cold. So if I can get away with like wearing the sport coat, that's kind of why.
Yeah, all right.
I have the kicks.
All right, so you're still one of the youth, right? Yeah, I can be hip. I can be cool. Yeah. Tamika, welcome. So tell the people who you are.
Yeah, so hi everybody, Tamika Hewlett. I am the Director of Audience Strategy at the Home Depot. I essentially have responsibility for all of our consumer audiences, and really what that means is our consumers are everyday people like you and me that are likely tackling home improvement projects in our homes and our living spaces. We affectionately call those DIYers or do-it-yourselfers. Really what we're doing with a lot of the work, it's really about how do we foster product adoption, how do we drive demand, how do we enable loyalty, and certainly continue to really drive engagement for the Home Depot brand through that work. I've been with Depot for about 6.5 years. I would say prior to that, a lot of experience at a lot of different companies, B2B, B2C. I've sort of touched retail, of course, but also tech. Spent a lot of time in manufacturing as well as financial services. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Retail has to be more fun than financial services, right?
1,000%.
So let's set the stage. What does customer first mean to you, and how does that really influence your strategy?
Yeah, I mean, being customers first for us is really all about like putting the customer at the core of how you formulate your marketing strategy. It is bearing in mind their needs, their preferences, their behaviors, their motivations, and then really translating that into value, right? And for us, it really kind of starts with thinking about like, what do we know about our customer? And we use that to really inform like how we think about segmentation and targeting. We also use it to inform like how we think about messaging, like because we obviously want to show up in the most relevant way. And that's also supported with how we develop like our content and really build out that content cadence. And then also we leverage our insight to really help us understand like where do we want to show up in terms of channel mix. So part of what my team is responsible for is also integrated marketing against these consumer audiences. And so making sure that we are as relevant as possible and on the right channels is absolutely critical for us.
And I imagine these channels will probably vary based upon, is it the DIYer, is it the pro, or is it the boomer who always goes here, right?
That's right, absolutely. And so, and we're going to get into some of this, I'm sure, as we talk about like how that sort of evolved for us as we think about the different consumer audiences that we go after.
So I teased it a little bit, right? I mean, Home Depot is a merchant-driven organization, right? Merchants control everything. It's product, product, product. So how do you balance the need to market the product while still maintaining a strong focus on that customer relationship?
Yeah, I mean, you're right? It is a product-driven company. We're really proud of that. We are a product authority, and we're really pleased that the moment you come into a Home Depot store, we likely have a brand that is a household name for you, or at least brands that we really can stand behind. So really leaning into product marketing is still a critical component of how we work. But really, as we've recognized, as the world has changed and how like customer preference has evolved, as choice has evolved, it's really important for us to really think about like really getting a deep understanding of the customer relationship. And so I talk about this a lot, this sort of notion of brand versus performance. And I would say any modern practice, Depot's not, to be exempt from that, is like you have to have a healthy sort of balance of brand versus performance. And so we still really activate, like top of funnel awareness strategy when you think about like how do we drive perception change? How do we drive brand awareness? My team really kind of comes in the middle when it like sort of speaks to like how are we driving that purchase intent? Like how are we really kind of owning those customer moments and really anchoring around consideration? And then there's still conversion driving activity because a component of our business is seasonal. Like for many of you, you probably every spring you're going out in your yards, tending to your lawn, hopefully you're getting your mulch when it's on promo, but tackling all of those projects. And so we have to really kind of have a pretty healthy, I would say, mix across kind of top down to bottom of funnel. But I always like to say to my teams, like literally regardless of kind of like how we're activating, modern day marketing now is really about like making it easy for customers to transact regardless of where you are in the funnel. And so really making sure you're really kind of building that into your marketing.
Yeah, so how have you made it easier for customers to interact, right? Is it about value, or is it more about the convenience of how they can pick up or even return things if it doesn't work, or just what toilet flusher do I need for the brand of toilet that I have?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's capabilities messaging. It's also product accessibility, but also really kind of anchoring on, and this is something that I would say is so core to Home Depot, is like, since the founding of our company, we really started as a helpful brand, right? Like even down our store associates, right? You come into the store, we really anchor on, you know, project know-how and really being accessible. And so wanting to make project doing, at least for my team, like instilling that confidence, making projects feel very approachable, but also making sure that you've got the right ways in which to be able to take on those projects, whether it's like things like free delivery or, you know, other capabilities to make it very easy for you to transact, but also to complete those projects.
And have you noticed that's even more important as this new generation comes up and maybe buying their first home, or maybe not? Like, how has the views of home improvement or DIY changed for millennials and Gs versus like baby boomers, your core?
Yeah, so I would say it's changed quite a bit. And so I'm really excited about the work that we're really leaning into related to Gen Z and millennial. I mean, we talked about some of that this morning. I mean, what we know about Gen Z, they're digitally native. They have a different sort of affinity to brands, like how they shop. So much as that is supported by how they connect with those brands. We're just seeing also they consume content very differently. They're engaging in different places. And so, you know, really for us, it was really about making sure that we are fostering really a deep, authentic connection. And a lot of that is through our storytelling. And so we're really leaning into like some of our project messaging, a lot of surprise and delight elements, you know, things like being a plant parent, right? Like, you know, something that quite honestly, we probably wouldn't have talked about probably several years ago. And so just really finding those really natural moments for us to really be able to immerse ourselves in the conversation appropriately, but in a way that feels very engaging for Gen Z and millennial.
And does that storytelling come to life on social, where they're more heavily penetrated, or on the Home Depot website, or maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, certainly because, you know, Gen Z and millennial is certainly more digitally native. We certainly lean into social. We leverage influencers as well to really help drive a lot of what I call like that brand advocacy, and we partner with them. But I would say, you know, I think in the way we've really approached it is like you've got to build an end-to-end experience. It's not just really honing in on paid. You've got to really be thinking about paid, earned, and owned. And I would even take it a step further, and some of the things that we're starting to expand, you know, to really engage with millennial and Gen Z in the right way. Like we've even got to be thinking about experiential activation. Yeah. You know, how do you take the show on the road and really kind of meet your audience where they are, and really being kind of connected into the things that they're connected in, and really finding natural ways, even for us as a, you know, a legacy home improvement retailer, for us to be able to really infuse ourselves in a very natural way.
Well, and you talked a little bit about like brand and performance, right? And I think everyone in this room has probably had the conversation of, is it brand marketing or is it performance marketing? Like, what's the most important aspect? But you touched on it. I think everyone knows who Home Depot is, but you guys still have some brand awareness or brand building of some capabilities that you do with younger generations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like things like even like free delivery. I talked about that a lot, but really just making sure people understand that. I would say, you know, this whole notion of convenience, it's table stakes, right? For this generation, they sort of expect it, and things like free delivery, it is to be expected, but just really making sure customers know that they can actually order something, and if they choose, they can pick it up in stores, right? We also have, you know, things like our pickup lockers and just other capabilities that, you know, quite honestly, I don't know that customers necessarily sort of make the connection to. And so, you know, not just honing in on just like, you know, because we can run campaigns that are focused on, you know, hey, free delivery, and we certainly do some of that, but what we see the secret sauce is really aligning kind of that storytelling of sort of like product, capability, you know, broader base sort of like, you know, how do you think holistically about that thing that you're solving for? Putting that really in a wrapper for a customer, we see that we drive the deepest engagement when we do that.
Yeah. So if the younger generation is all about convenience, right, make it as easy as possible for me, what about your boomers? What about those core audiences? How do you keep them engaged? Because they probably don't identify as plant parents, right?
Well, but it's interesting. So believe it or not, with a lot of the newer marketing that we're doing really to reach Gen Z and millennial, we're actually finding that we're sometimes even over-indexing with some of our more core audiences. They're actually starting to engage with a lot of that newer content. And I think some of that is just really supported by they have a trust in the Home Depot. It's seen as fresh. It seems as very inspiring. inspiring, and it's just a different take on how they like could potentially even engage with our with our brand. And so we're seeing just even a natural draw there, even with our core audiences as well.
And I imagine a similar perception with pro too, right? If you talk to the pros, it's not like the consumer is going to go on deaf ears and be like, Home Depot has nothing for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So what were some of the key challenges that you faced as you were shifting from a product-driven approach to a customer-first strategy?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, you know, for any organization, look, we're for profit and we are in the business of driving shareholder value. And so there's naturally going to be that inclination of like, hey, if we don't push enough on the product, do we sort of risk not sort of really driving sort of the sales impact that we're all used to and familiar with? But what I've really enjoyed about really kind of our approach, and we're doing both, right? It's not sort of one or the other, it's really both, but really starting to really position with our organization that, you know, if driving sort of sales is really short-term in nature, it's really about how do you drive like longer-term profitability, and that comes with really driving a deeper customer relationship. And so what we've been able to really give back to our organization is like, well, look at the customers that we're now bringing in. Look at how we're really driving a deeper retention rate. Like, look at how we're driving deeper stickiness and increasing basket building and driving AOV. And so it's created richer conversations for us back to the organization, and I think that that's helped with some of that transformation.
So as you dove into these consumer insights of what the new generation wants, or even what the older generation is looking for now, right, as they age up and can't tackle the big projects that they used to, how do you translate those consumer insights into just like actionable strategies, right, putting it into use?
Yeah, and so I would say, you know, we spend a lot of time doing social listening. We conduct, you know, our fair share of quant study. I mean, we spend a lot of time just that is the benefit, I would say, of being in a large company, is just you have access to so much data, whether it's about like customer behavior, their propensity to buy, what they're buying, even, you know, predictive insight and data. But we do conduct a lot of like qual and quant studies to help us be really informed. We also like customer care. My God, when customers like come in and call for complaints, it is a phenomenal source of insight for us. And then I would also say our stores, right? Like we try, even as marketers, to try when we can to be out in the stores, really just to kind of see what's happening. We call it the wild, right? But really kind of immersing ourselves in the swirl of like how customers are actually interacting in our stores, and like how can we potentially translate that potentially into a new content play or deeper storytelling. Or are we sort of missing an opportunity, or maybe there's an audience segment that we should be going after that we're maybe not going after? Or are there some adjacency plays between different audience segments that we're looking at so that we can then make those connections for just deeper relevancy?
I feel bad for the person whose job is it to comb through customer complaints for customer insights.
You and me both.
But do you have an example of like something that you found out, whether it's through social listening or customer feedback or store associates, and like how that translated back to a marketing strategy?
Yeah, you know, I would say the biggest example that we have, you know, if you guys think during the pandemic, many of us were probably taking on 1 million projects in our homes. I was one of them. I remodeled my basement. But what we found is that a lot of folks were just taking on these large-scale projects, like remodeling their kitchens, like remodeling their bathrooms, and it was just tremendous growth, you know, for the company and just incredible for us. But, you know, what we're actually seeing now, you know, customers aren't moving as much. You know, quite frankly, it's too expensive to do so. So God help you if you can actually find a house for a good price. But it's just more expensive. And so we also saw with that demand shifted a little bit from sort of those large-scale projects to more smaller-scale projects. So not to say that customers weren't DIYing, they were just DIYing very differently. And so really being able to pivot our approach, be responsive to that market shift, and then be able to incorporate it appropriately has been one of the things that we've been doing. And I'm really pleased with the team's work, because I think coming out of the pandemic, I think we all learned so much, right, on how to go to market and how to show up for our customers, but really making sure that we bake in that level of agility in our marketing has been something that's been really exciting for us.
So instead of, you know, large kitchen remodels, it's like maybe just add a backsplash, or let me change the color of my cabinets.
Yeah, fun weekend update. You know, look for less, right? Like I think there's many ways to sort of DIY, and what we're finding too is that Gen Z and Millennial are keeping us honest about like what it means to DIY on their terms and to do it very differently, and so really leaning in there, I think, has also been really fun.
So then when so much of home improvement can be commoditized, right? When there's products and so many choices that you can get from, how are you differentiating yourself? Like, what are kind of your tent poles that you're sticking your ground in?
Yeah, so I would say for us, I mean, look, I think, gone are the days of just really leaning into sort of price item and promotion. Everybody's doing that, and quite frankly, it's very easy to really kind of consume content in that way and to really know where to go when it comes to, hey, I need an item for a specific need or use case. We're really kind of anchoring on really kind of our core and really what we believe is our true value differentiator, and it's our know-how. We sort of started our founding with being a brand that's really all about education, really teaching customers on how to DIY and, quite frankly, how to tackle those projects. I give the best example of even sort of how I came into DIY, and it was through my dad, right? My dad is a general contractor, also a licensed plumber. They don't make them like that anymore. But he really taught me how to DIY, and I still remember like the toolkit that he gave me when I went off to college and then into my apartment that had my hammer and all the things to like patch a wall. Like I could do some damage, but really just being able to kind of create those moments and like have that connection to brands. Like we want to continue that for all of our customers and ultimately have customers for life.
Yeah. So let's then get down to the brass tacks, right? So instead of the kind of qualitative look at it, like what are some of those quant aspects that you're looking at? How are you measuring the effectiveness of your retention strategies and then adjusting them based upon the consumer, based on your feedback or deliverability?
Yeah, so I would say, very tactically on how my team and I sort of assess our success, it is our ability to drive those deep, authentic relationships with our customers. It's driving demand. It's enabling loyalty. And then it's also, I would say for us, really helping to cement our brand position and really doing that in the most sort of native and organic way. And so we look at things like new customer acquisition, like how many customers are we actually bringing in? How are we retaining customers over a period of time? How are we seeing baskets grow? How are we actually reactivating customers maybe that may have sort of fallen off in terms of spend pattern and behavior? And so really bringing, I would say, especially coming from B2B too, and having that experience, B2B shops do this really well. Like they're really kind of anchored on the customer life cycle. And so really shifting and introducing those principles into B2C has really been a lot of what we've been able to do. And like I said, it's been really interesting to see the narratives that we've been able to have with our business leadership on really the impact that marketing is making.
Are you also looking at, how you can, or if you're introducing customers to new product categories? So
Absolutely.
they always buy mulch.
Right.
Now can we get them to the hardscapes?
That's
Or
right.
now can we go in there? So you're looking to see how to cross-sell too.
Absolutely. It's core to how we think about retention, right? It's like, if a customer's shopping here, where else are they shopping within the store, right? Because there's value. Ultimately, that enables customer lifetime value. And so we're very anchored on that. And then, one of the things that we do kind of with that data, team's really good at like looking at like optimization. And so, not only as campaigns are running, we sort of have postmortems where we bring kind of, data science, measurement, media, creative, strategy together to really take a step back just to understand how our campaigns are performing. We also do that middle of the way too. So looking at standard things like impressions, clicks, engagements to really tell us like how our campaigns are actually performing in flight, where we can potentially influence things and really kind of maybe pivot our execution. But we also have a pretty healthy test and learn agenda. And so it's kind of core to really what I would say for every audience strategist on our team is that, they have a test and learn agenda. Like, right, we've got limited dollars. And so we've got to be really thoughtful about.
Even Home Depot has limited dollars.
1,000%. 1,000%, right? Like we're constantly making the case for more budget, but really being thoughtful about what we can control and kind of win, but then really being thoughtful about what are the things that we want to learn as we continue to get sharper and smarter, and making sure that's embedded in our test and learn agenda.
Are there, I don't think anyone in this room would argue that like you need a test and learn agenda, test before you launch, you have to see how it's going to work. Are there things that we should just go do though, right? Like, do we have to test everything?
No, when it comes to millennial and Gen Z, we can't wait, right? I mean, I think it moves so quickly, and I think that generation especially is putting the pressure on us to really kind of pivot and to move fast. And so this is where I think like technology like AI really comes into play as it relates to like how do we have greater agility and how we creatively bring our storytelling to life and really activate a lot of our campaigns. Like how do we really create those end-to-end experiences across all of our properties when you think about site and email, and really leaning into those capabilities responsibilities. And so you can't really do everything. I always say that. Can't do everything at once, but you can certainly be thoughtful about like how you activate and really plan for it accordingly. And that's really how we approach it.
So tomorrow we're going to have a whole panel about personalization, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but at a retailer who has so many different audience types between consumer and pro and so many different demographics, right? Younger, millennials, the boomers, what ways are you personalizing those experiences to talk to them like they want to be talked to?
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, some of that I think Allison covered a little bit of it for Forever 21 and how she talked about like really experimenting in CRM. So really having like banner messaging where we can be really relevant and really can kind of test there. We're also running some very interesting tests on .com as well, as it just kind of relates to really anchoring around seasonally relevant moments, you know, especially as we think about like really spring, or you think about fall, if you think about Halloween. Everybody go out and get their 12-foot skeleton, by the way, if you haven't already. And so like we find ways where we naturally do it. I would say, you know, I think the undertone, I think for everybody is that we're all trying to figure out what personalization sort of looks like, and really kind of testing our way into personalization appropriately, and really kind of, you know, creating those small wins and then scaling where you can.
Someone talked about retail media as we were, you know, thinking through what are the big topics that everyone wants to cover. So what ways does your team work with the Home Depot's retail media team?
Yes, so our retail media practice is Orange Apron Media. That is the branding for that. Phenomenal organization. They've just grown just so much, really, since you probably, Erin, from when you remembered it, because Erin actually started off really bringing our retail media practice to life. But that organization is so critical for what really we do, because they're really all about really growing our brands by way of our suppliers, right? Suppliers are such a critical component of the Home Depot. It actually helps to support why we have the product authority that we do. So at Home Depot, we want our brands to be successful, and so that team is really anchored on like, how do you build the right programming and the right strategies to help grow those brands and those products through our stores. And really what that exchange looks like for us, while it's a different team, we work really closely with them on really just helping them understand like how our audience strategies are performing, like what are we actually learning in terms of the audiences that we're going after that potentially could be replicated through some of our supplier programs. And I would say even vice versa, right? Like, you know, take some of the big brands that we work with. I mean, they know their customers best too, based off of how they're positioning their brands for their customers. And so it's really a two-way exchange on helping us really understand the customer, and as we've been talking about, being really customer first. So
you're not totally siloed from them, right?
No, it is a close partnership. While it's a different team with very specific objectives, we do work and collaborate often.
Last question before we open it up to the audience. How are you ensuring your personal team is really aligned to this customer first vision? So we're all kind of marching to the same objective.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, it's really about like, we've got to channel the customer at every turn. And while we may not be the customer in all cases, we certainly can appreciate and have empathy for who the customer is. And so really keeping the customer at the forefront of how we think and we work. And I would say, you know, what we're seeing is a very interesting kind of marketplace. You know, I talked a little bit about what's happening from an economic standpoint with moving and the shift there of what's happening, but I also fundamentally believe this is the opportunity for innovation also, and for us to really kind of lean in there, think differently about like how we can really go after different audiences, like how can we really disrupt from sort of like a channel mix perspective, how can we sort of disrupt with creative. So for us, it's really about, you know, I talk about this sort of notion of like either this 80-20 or 90-10, right? If 80 or 90 is really BAU, you should really be reserving that 20-10 for like new and different. And so really almost challenging my teams, really even through the review process of like really thinking about like, what is that sort of 20-10 for you in terms of how you really want to go after your audience strategies and really drive innovation.
I can't believe that was a full 25 minutes. That was the fastest 25 minutes of my life.
25 minutes already.
We are already at time. Questions from the group?
Hi, I'm Nobles. I'm with L'Oreal. Great panel. Thank you so much. Got a ton out of that. I'm glad you left me with a question, Erin, because you hit them all. So appreciate it. Tamika, thank you so much for your time. The way that you describe a really flexible 360 go-to-market process that honestly leads from innovation is quite remarkable. It sounded like it was easy. I know it's not. If you could just talk a little bit about like how your internal operational process, either selling to leadership or creating the operational model to be able to be fast and flexible like that without maybe a lot of red tape? Because that's what it sounds like you're there. Can you explain a little bit how that frame works for your company?
Yeah, and I hope I did not make that sound like way easier than what it is, because I'm just going to give you the raw, right, when we talk about this. We are a very matrix company, like highly interdependent. We had a lot of teams that we work with, and so I would say it's some days it's got its good days and bad days, and we work through some of that. But what I have found kind of more times than not, we try to bring everybody at the table, especially at the onset when we're formulating our strategy. So, you know, as we were kind of making this pivot into some of the work that we're doing around Millennial and Gen Z, I mean, some of this was sort of newer work that we had stood up. Like, we were already leaning into Millennial and Gen Z, but in the way that we really wanted to do it was really different. And so we brought everybody to the table, really talked a lot about our strategy, really talked about like how each team was going to be impacted by that work, where we actually needed the expertise of some of those teams, whether it was data science, measurement, or creative, and quite frankly, just created a place where everybody kind of had a seat in helping to formulate that strategy. And we found that we had, you know, certainly success there. And I would just say just lots of communication. When you think you're not communicating, over-communicate, right? And just doing so almost sometimes ad nauseum, but I think it's really important to really bring people along, because you're absolutely right. In bigger companies, what tends to happen is somebody's misaligned, someone isn't clear, there's another priority or objective that comes way out of left field, and so really making sure that you're kind of really positioning kind of the priority where it kind of sits in everyone's sort of respective sort of scope of responsibility, and then just making sure that everybody feels like mutually vested in the work, I would say.
Hi, I'm Liz Beer from Michaels. I'm probably going to find you after because I have so many questions. It was Sophie's choice trying to figure out which one I wanted to ask. But you talked a lot about being a merchant-led business, and you have a lot of different kinds of, you know, segments of your audiences. I'm assuming you have automation to kind of personalize the experience. Otherwise, you would have the largest team in history creating all the different versions. But then you also talked about education and how that's a big part of your marketing strat. How do you automate and personalize the stories around the product instead of just having, you know, a pipe cleaner pull in next to a lawnmower and trying to sell that? How do you kind of create these personalized stories that make sense for each customer but at scale?
Yeah, I mean, we really think about really doing it more multi-channel, right? And really almost sometimes picking the channels that we really want to lean in with certain messages. So let's just take the plant parent example. Like, maybe we might be activating that on paid, and maybe we might do sort of a deeper dive of that like in CRM. So we're very intentional about like where we place our storytelling. Like I said before, like the know-how piece is so critical to what we do. And I think I was talking to someone from your team about like the kids' workshops. And so that is also sort of another platform, right, really for us, especially really reaching kind of like those younger audiences. But we try to just really be thoughtful about infusing sort of know-how in the right places. You know, for my team, again, we're very much, I would say, more mid-funnel consideration and intent. And so very easy really for us to really kind of lean into that, because quite honestly, you know, when it comes to like projects, a lot of that is inspiration-based. A lot of that is like, hey, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And so now we've got to really make it very simple and easy and feel very approachable. And so just finding like sort of the appropriate places to really be able to sort of tell those stories, and then really pulling it through in the right ways, I would say, as consistently as we can is sort of how we approach it.
Thank you.
That is all the time that we have for questions now. I'm so sorry, but I think you're going to be a popular person after this to get hunted down for some questions. Tamika, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.